Did the ancient Greeks really think that a uterus would wander throughout a woman's body? Find out this week in Required Readings Top 100.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Required Readings Top 100. Last week I spoke about Hamlet. This week we're going to be talking about your book. And what book is it this week?
This week, one of my absolutely recommended top 100, well, top 50 for me, top 50 books is Unwell Women, A Journey Through Medicine and Myth in a Man-Made World by Elinor Cleghorn. I read this actually a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago at this point, and I had known about it for maybe a few months prior to me reading it. There was a book that predated the publication of this book called Doing Harm by Maya Dusenberry. And it is about how the medical industry, the current medical industry, it does not do nearly a good enough job for women and health or women's health. It's an absolute travesty, actually, in the modern world, how little females still have yet to be studied and understood. This book itself, Unwell Women, it actually gives a little bit more of the history of women's, or of the medicine of women. So it starts off in ancient Greece and it comes all the way forward to modern times, I believe 2021, 2021. It was really, really interesting. So it's broken apart into 3 sections. And we were just talking about this before we hit the play button or before we hit the record button, that the parts, how it's broken up is actually kind of weird in that it starts off like part 1 is ancient Greece all the way to the 19th century. And then part 2 is the 19th century to 1945. And then you have 1945 onwards. I actually wished that there was more time spent on ancient Greece all the way up leading to the 19th century. And maybe even a little less than, of course, from the 19th century until nowadays. But even that being said, the middle section talks a lot about the creation of birth control for women. And that was just the science behind it was actually really fascinating. The advertisements that went into it was fascinating. And male opinions about it in the 1940s was absolutely fascinating as well. I want to say actually that the birth control pill was originally created to stave off any symptoms of menopause. So it actually had nothing to do with birth control, but I will check that and I'll put that in the comments below whether or not I remember that correctly. But it was quite funny actually when I was reading that part.
It's interesting. Does she cover anything about, this isn't actually, so I prepared some questions beforehand, but as you were talking, this just kind of occurred to me. Did she prepare, did she talk about ancient birth control at all?
Not that I remember, no. I mean, there is definitely parts where she mentioned Galen and Hippocrates.
Yeah, Hippocrates, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't remember any ancient birth control.
Yeah.
What do you know from your studies?
I know that there's some suggestions in some texts, and I think it is Galen or Hippocrates. It could also be, there's Pliny the Elder does a lot of stuff about the natural sciences. So I'm not sure who it is. It's not an area of my expertise, but I know that it is talked about. I just don't know for sure.
Yeah.
So I did want to ask you something because this book covers so much time. Was there like a through line that kind of goes from beginning to end that you sort of found surprising that it goes through a long period of time from the beginning, from the Greek period to the modern period that sort of surprised you?
Nothing that surprised me. But the through line is that women have gotten the short end of the stick from time immemorial.
Yeah.
Just the complete lack of understanding. I mean, first off, it's understandable that ancient Greeks are probably not going to know as much as we do about the human body, period. There wasn't really dissection going on back then. Dissection didn't really come into modern medicine until around the years of Rene Descartes, because I know that he petitioned the church in order for dissections to become a regular thing. And even then, actually, the bodies that they dissected, it's kind of interesting because it's flip-flopped from then till now. The bodies that they dissected in early Renaissance, what year is Rene Descartes?
Yeah, I mean so that would be like during the Enlightenment period.
So Rene Descartes earlier than the Enlightenment, no?
Well, we'll have to check, but I believe that you could say the Renaissance, yeah.
Okay, anyways.
Yeah.
So the bodies that they were dissecting then were actually criminals who had been hanged. Or prostitutes that may have died from various diseases. But now the dissections that we do are old people. So in both scenarios, you're getting only a certain subsection of society. So not everything is completely known. And again, going back to the criminals that they were dissecting, 96% of them were males. So they weren't really of any understanding of the female body, even though they were now allowed to dissect. But the female body was never studied as much as, it's never been studied as much as the male body. And there's just complete misunderstandings of what is going on the inside. The ancient Greeks thought that the woman's uterus would roam around the body. It was just this wandering womb. And, whether or not it was in her head, that might be a headache. And if it's in her chest, that might be a heart attack. Or, if it's if maybe it's a stomach ulcer or, whatever. And they would come to some conclusions that were based off of where her womb would be on a certain day, which is absolutely infuriating. But again, they just didn't know. But then they didn't want to know either. They didn't actually, I don't feel as though they wanted to pursue the knowledge of that. And so, it is that through line of, and I don't want to say that, men purposely did this. I think it was just a consequence of the times that we were living in up until now. It wasn't actually until 1993 that women have now been required to be included in medical studies. So,
yeah, that's actually really interesting. And it makes me wonder why that is. Like what social conditions would have specifically led to that? So for instance, in antiquity, the Greek and Roman world is to a certain degree, religion plays less of a role to a certain degree, as it does in later periods regarding what you can do with the human body and science in general. In many ways, the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans were far more permissive about the pursuit and study of science. Yeah. So you have people like Aristotle, for instance, who is known as a philosopher, but who actually goes into this period of time in his studies where he's actually doing dissections. Which is really fascinating,
they were secret dissections, though, weren't they? Or?
Well, they were sort of. He was almost like a wandering scientist, and so, but he's not doing them really on humans. He's doing it on animals.
Okay.
And so then you have this sort of confusion about the anatomy, like you note, but there seems to be less confusion about the male anatomy than there is about the female anatomy. You have all these medieval drawings, which are hilarious, of the female reproductive system. Yeah. So it makes me think about the wandering womb. And can you sort of think about what would have caused that lack of study? So, I know, for instance, that Leonardo, for instance, Da Vinci got into a lot of trouble because he was actually dissecting humans, but he was doing it to understand, I think, the musculature, the anatomy. Yeah. But what specific conditions do you think would have led to this lack of knowledge? And there's an obvious difference between the lack of knowledge of male and female anatomy. Is it the church? Is it something else?
Mm-hmm. I think that it is multifaceted, and I think that it's more complicated than anyone can truly put together in one book. I mean, this book is like 300, 400 pages, and it's an absolutely wonderful book. But yeah, I think that the reasons behind it are just so multifaceted. A lot of times, as I've been reading recently, a lot of the sequestering of women, and therefore leading to the misunderstanding of women, because now women have to be, put away and clothed entirely and not looked at and can't participate in society. And so going to the doctor is probably not going to happen at all. But a lot of that actually originates from inheritance laws. So in order for a son to inherit the land of his father, they had to know that he was the one and true heir. And the only way to do that is to completely sequester the would-be wife so that she had absolutely no relations, and no relations could ever be questioned about her history with men. So she has never seen a man probably in her entire life, because she is absolutely out of sight, out of mind. And so, yeah, it begins with this idea of true inheritance laws. And then because women have been sequestered, or they've been, out of sight, out of mind, they're literally out of sight, out of mind. So they're not being studied. They're not being taken care of. I mean, you do see a lot of women doctors or women.
There's also midwives too.
Well, midwives, yeah, but that's for a certain element of female reproduction and history and whatnot. It's only like 20-year period for a female. But you see a lot of knowledgeable females that tend to women. They weren't called doctors, so I'm having a difficult time really labeling what they were. But they were very, very knowledgeable about the female body, about what they were doing. And so women would go to women, but then you bring in more money, because it's always about the money, either inheritance or actual money. You bring in the men who, doctors didn't really exist before, and it was like butchers,
or there were barbers.
Or barbers, that's
barbers
right. Barbers were
often,
the ones that were the surgeons. But then you actually have medicine being a formed industry. And with that industry, of course, there's an economy that surrounds it. And then goodness forbid that women partake in an industry and make money. So now these women practitioners are being called witches, or they're just being shunned. And so women no longer can get medical help. And the men who are the medicine people have absolutely no idea about a female body, because they've been out of sight, out of mind for so long.
Well, that's actually really great, because that kind of brings me to my next question, which is actually the notion of power and hierarchy in medicine. So this is something that is kind of a subject that is covered in this book, which is this notion of medicine of power versus medicine of healing.
Oh.
And so you have this, and she talks about this, where you have this, that medicine sort of is both. But medicine is also used as a tool for creating hierarchies. It's still today, certainly it was in times previous. You have the gendered hierarchy, where men would probably get better
education.
Well, education, yeah, sure, education, but also just better health service, for lack of a better term, or it was more supported. But you also, even today, medicine functions as a tool of hierarchy. It's almost like a class thing. But then there's this other aspect of it, which is medicine of healing, which is the actual act of healing someone.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering, how can we hold these two truths together? So the one being the aspect where medicine is sort of, especially today, is sort of a tool of creating class, and it's a tool of power, it's a tool of making a lot of money, but also it's supposed to be a tool for healing, for people going to a doctor to be healed. And how do you sort of balance these two truths?
Well, I think you said it, that we've married medicine and money. So unfortunately, is what it is in our current climate, in our current times, that medicine, you can't have access to medicine unless you have access to money. But I also think that all too often we trust doctors too much. We think that they know everything. And being in medicine, it's not a black or white situation. It is really an art form. It is sometimes a guess and test. And so to be able to trust somebody and know that they don't know all the answers too. So like you also have to take on some self-responsibility for either finding some answers or really getting in tune with your body to understand the differences in how you're feeling and measuring those markers, so that you're not entirely placing all of your reliance on another person. I think with that reliance comes the power and the power trips that I think a lot of doctors do have as well. I think that we've had a conversation that medical school is, this is going to be controversial, but I think that medical school should really be a trade school. That's what they do. They learn one thing, they focus on one thing, and they get really good at one thing, but that does not make them an expert in everything. There are lots of studies that the best time to have a heart attack is actually during the medical conference where all of the heart surgeons are actually out of the hospital. You have a better outcome if there is not a doctor that focuses right on your problem and only your problem, because other doctors may think outside of the box and they may start to see other relations. Now, again, if you're having a heart attack, please go to the hospital, regardless of whether or not
medical experts.
We are not medical experts. I am not by any means condoning skipping out on anything medical that you do need help for, but studies do show that. So I think that, taking money out of it, maybe that will alleviate the power trip that some doctors get. But again, like, you got to take the money out of medicine, but you also have to take the money out of university, because a lot of these doctors, they spend a lot of money on their university. So then they need a lot of money in order to pay that back. And it's just a vicious cycle. And I don't want to say we're going back to the barter system, but it would be really nice to just, get money out of the equation.
So if you take money out of the equation, what's the incentive for someone to go to medical school?
To help people. If you ask any 6-year-old, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they say a doctor, and you ask them why, they're probably going to say to help people.
And not to become millionaires.
No doctor is really a millionaire. Unless they're a plastic surgeon. Maybe.
Medicine,
I don't think the doctors are really that rich these days.
Yeah. Maybe the Kardashians' plastic surgeon might be a millionaire.
Maybe.
Well, okay, so this brings me to my last question. And as you already talked about, this book covers a long period of time. And it's interesting the way that she's divided the book up, because it's really sort of the pre-modern period of medicine is sort of handled as one section, it seems like. So you have from the Greek period. And by the way, you have medicine, you have evidence of medicine going back to the Sumerian period. Yeah. There's actually cuneiform tablets talking about different kinds of ways of treating illnesses. But she covers the Greek period up until sort of where you can think of as the pre-modern period, right? Yeah. So the 19th century. And then there's about 100 years that she covers before, World War II, I believe. Yeah. So from the mid-19th century to about the mid-20th century, and then the modern, and then the contemporary period. But I sort of think, I sort of think of it as the ancient period, the medieval period, and the modern period, which isn't the way that she divides it. But reading this book, based on what you've read in this book, when do you think is the absolute worst period of time to be a woman who is ill or pregnant or whatever? What's the worst period of time?
Now.
And what's the best? And why?
I don't know about the best. I think that there has been different points in history where different aspects of women's health might have been at the best treatment level. But I definitely think that now we are at probably the worst in history time for female health.
Even with Novocaine, even with
Novocaine. Even with Novocaine, even with
spinal taps.
Yeah, with general anesthesia, local anesthesia. There are more and more reports and more videos coming out about women who are not being treated seriously by their doctors. They have illnesses, they have maybe endometriosis, or they have something that is treatable, absolutely treatable from the get. Maybe it's perimenopause symptoms, maybe it is infertility issues. They're going to their doctors. They have this trust in their doctors, and their doctors are literally saying to them, "It's in your head. You are crazy." That is absolutely ridiculous in 2026 to have any doctor dismiss a woman and any symptom that she might be having. It is absolutely ludicrous. The mortality rates of women giving birth in hospitals has actually increased in the last 10 years. I actually know a woman who in 2017 died giving birth to her second child because no one is paying attention. No one is listening. Even though in 1993 they have legislation saying that all of these new drugs that are being created, they have to be tested on women, they're still not. 50% of the studies. There are a lot of times where they are being excluded because they might be of age, of childbearing age. They might be perimenopause age, they don't want to ever in those studies harm a fetus. And, I get that. I totally understand that. But if a woman is single, she's not sexually active, probably not going to get with child anytime soon, she should actually be allowed to participate. We need healthy women to be included in these studies because medication levels are not the same for men and women. Men metabolize things a lot faster than women, and so the dosage might be less for women, and it could be vice versa too, depending on what kind of medicine, what system of the body it is focused on. So I do think that this is probably very, very controversial. I think that now is the absolute worst time for women to try to be not unwell.
All right, then. Well, if you have any thoughts or any opinions, you can leave it in the comments below. Thanks for joining us, and see you again next week.
If you made it this far, make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you are notified of any upcoming episodes. It's free for you, but it means the world to us.